After a long time out of the cage, Conor McGregor returned to get knocked out by Dustin Poirier. And it has to make you wonder, do you think Mystic Mac regrets turning his back on boxing? Before we get started, let's get one thing straight. In the cage, at his best, Conor McGregor was one of the best, as he so humbly pointed out after beating Eddie Alvarez to become the UFC's first ever simultaneous dual division champ.
Was there anything at all surprising about it to you?
Not one bit. They're not on my level. You gotta have size, reach, length. You've gotta have some attributes. If you come in any way equal to me, I'm gonna rip your whole head off, and that's it. I tell it every time. Eddie's a solid competitor. Eddie's a warrior. But he shouldn't have been in here with me, and that's just the truth of it.
He's right. There are levels to MMA, and in terms of striking, the uber-confident Irishman was one of the most effective knockout artists in UFC history. His kicking game was on point. Long, stabbing kicks took the wind out of opponents. Side kicks backed opponents to the cage, and roundhouse kicks forced them where he wanted. And that was the key to setting up his biggest asset.
One shot is all it takes me. Check the facts. I bounce shots off there. I bounce heads off the canvas and dribble that.
More than any of his other weapons, McGregor is famous for his counter left hand, and with good reason. Once he has opponents backed up against the cage, he runs people into one of the most accurate and brutal lefts the sport has ever seen. And if people charged him, he'd crack them with a check hook like he did with Jose Aldo. Either way, he punched with more power than almost any other MMA fighter at feather and lightweight. By 2016, he'd won 18 of his 21 pro fights by stoppage, 16 by punches, with the other 2 coming via elbows and a corner stoppage due to too many punches. With that many finishes with his fists, it's understandable why so many people thought he could be a boxer. But when McGregor tried his hand at the sweet science, he did it in the most McGregor way possible. He took on the biggest name in the game, Floyd Mayweather, the longtime pound-for-pound champ, the man who had never lost a professional boxing match in his life. But most importantly, Mayweather was 41, and he'd retired 2 years prior. While Mayweather may not have been in his prime, he did beat Manny Pacquiao, who went on to beat some of the best welterweight champs in the world, all while still being a champ in his 40s. So, comparatively speaking, Mayweather was definitely not over the hill when he faced McGregor in McGregor's debut. But McGregor's punching power and unorthodox striking had many believing his skills could transfer over into boxing. But watching the fight, they just didn't. While he definitely had his moments in the first 4 rounds, it wasn't anything someone of Mayweather's caliber hadn't walked through before. It has to be said, he went 10 rounds with one of the best to ever do it, but it was a 12-round fight. That loss leads us to the question, should McGregor have stuck to boxing? And if you want the quick answer, it's no. Conor took up a new sport when he was turning 30. And as well as he did, there's no way he beats any of the new champs in the divisions he'd compete in, despite what he says.
5, 6. Boxing has been dear to my heart my whole entire life. So, I will contend in boxing bouts going forward, and I will contend in mixed martial arts bouts going forward. I will rule both with an iron fist.
So let's look at who he might face, starting with boxing's lightweight division, where he'd run into the undisputed kingpin, Teofimo Lopez. Now, Lopez is slightly shorter and lighter, but he hits hard, much harder than McGregor, thanks to a lifetime dedicated to punching and only punching. No amount of fancy footwork has ever gotten past him, and unlike McGregor, you can forget about him slowing down. He'll pound away until the Irishman can't stand up anymore. If Conor went straight to welterweight, which is probably more well-suited to his new build, he'd have to take out someone like Terence Crawford, one of the slickest boxers in the game today. What Conor does in the cage, Bud does the equivalent of in the ring, but from southpaw and orthodox, and you wouldn't know the difference. He's an absolute master at setting traps through pressure and movement, and without elbows and kicks and knees and takedowns, Conor gets beat up, and beat up bad. That leaves Conor somewhere around middleweight, where Gennady Golovkin awaits. And Conor does not want a piece of Triple G. The Kazakh destroyer of men has the record for world titles at that weight, and he has the second best knockout ratio in the division's history. He's a monster, and McGregor would be mad to try something that dangerous. But they don't call boxing prize fighting for nothing. Financially speaking, on whether McGregor should have continued boxing, the answer is an emphatic yes. The bout with Mayweather earned him as much money as all of the UFC stars have ever earned combined. Probably. The fact is, if he took on just one more of boxing's Mayweather-esque superstars, he'd be guaranteed to make hundreds of millions again. And that means one of two men. The first is Canelo Alvarez. And Canelo Alvarez is a beast. In the squared circle, he'd murder McGregor. It's not even a question. In the last 5 years, the Mexican phenom has crumbled all comers from middle to light heavyweight. And not just jobbers. Canelo crumbles champions. And these are champions at least 20 pounds heavier than McGregor at his heaviest. Conor, like them, gets crumbled too. The second man is Manny Pacquiao, who is at a considerable size and age disadvantage. But McGregor still gets crumbled. At his best, Pacquiao was the best. A human buzzsaw of footwork, speed, and power. The Filipino could throw more than 1,000 punches in a fight, landing at a ridiculous percentage rate, and when he connected hard. Harder than a man of his size had any right to, and harder than Conor has ever hit anything in his life. And Conor hit a bus with a trolley. Now that Pacquiao is in the twilight of his career, he doesn't get the knockouts he used to, but make no mistake. Neither did Mayweather, and that is particularly bad news for McGregor fans. Mayweather is one of the most defensive fighters in history. In fact, Mayweather made a career out of not getting hit more than he did hitting people. And Mayweather stopped McGregor inside of 12 rounds. If McGregor thinks he can get past one of the most dangerous and aggressive punchers in lightweight history, he's got another thing coming. And that thing is unconsciousness. But financially speaking, it's a no-brainer. Conor should go back to boxing for a mega fight and rake in another $100 or so million. But that no-brainer might cost him his brain, because any of the fights we've just discussed seem like a guaranteed trip to the hospital.
Thanks for watching. And remember, if you want more fight sports in your life, just hit the subscribe button.